My name is Alex Carter, and I'm 34 years old now. I work as an architect in Atlanta, where the rhythm of city life keeps me busy enough to forget the complexities of family for weeks at a time. But the story I'm about to tell isn't about the me of today. It's about the me from 5 years ago, when I was 29, when everything I thought I knew about my family began to unravel like a poorly sewn seam. The summer of 2019 was particularly brutal in Georgia. By the time I pulled my Honda Civic up the gravel drive to the family estate that Friday evening in July, the heat had settled into everything like a living thing. The Carter estate sat on 200 acres of rolling hills, about an hour southeast of Atlanta. The main house was a sprawling antebellum mansion with white columns and wraparound porches, surrounded by ancient oak trees draped in Spanish moss. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Alex, there you are, Maya's voice cut through the humid air as she bounded down the front steps. My 22-year-old cousin had just finished her junior year at the University of Georgia, and she carried herself with the confident energy of someone who believed the world was still full of possibilities. "How's summer break treating you?" I asked, accepting her enthusiastic hug. "Oh, you know. Arguing with my parents about my major. Reading books they think are too radical, the usual." She grinned and linked her arm through mine. "I'm so glad you're here. Things have been tense." I found Grandma Rose in the back parlor, sitting in her favorite armchair with Toby, the family's ancient golden retriever, at her feet. She was working on a crossword puzzle, completely absorbed in whatever clue had caught her attention. "7 letters for enduring love," she murmured to herself, then looked up as I entered, her face lit up with genuine joy. "Alex, come here, darling." I crossed the room and leaned down to kiss her cheek, breathing in her familiar scent of rosewater and peppermint. "How are you, Grandma?" "Better now that you're here," she said, patting my hand. "Sit with me for a minute. Tell me about your work." Saturday evening brought the main event, formal dinner in the dining room, with the table extended to its full length, place cards, and everyone dressed in their finest. But as we gathered, I realized something that made my blood run cold. Grandma Rose wasn't at the table. "Where's Grandma Rose?" I asked Maya. "Dad," I called down the table, "where's Grandma Rose?" My father looked up from pouring wine. "Oh, she decided to eat in the kitchen tonight. Said she'd be more comfortable there." "More comfortable? She decided that, or you decided it for her?" The conversation around the table stopped altogether. I found myself standing, my chair scraping against the hardwood floor. "I'm not making a scene," I said when my mother protested. "I'm asking why Grandma Rose is eating in the kitchen while the rest of us sit at her table, in her house." I pushed through the swinging door and found exactly what I'd expected. Grandma Rose sat alone at the small kitchen table, a plate of food in front of her that she wasn't eating. The expression on her face, hurt and humiliation, made me want to put my fist through the wall. "You belong at that table," I told her. When my parents followed me into the kitchen, when the confrontation escalated, when everything finally came to a head, I heard myself saying words that would change everything. "I'm going to inherit this estate." The words hung in the kitchen air like the echo of a gunshot. For a moment, nobody moved, nobody breathed. Even Toby lifted his head, as if sensing that something fundamental had just shifted. My father was the first to recover. "What did you just say?" "You heard me." I was amazed at how steady my voice sounded. "I said I'm going to inherit this estate." My mother laughed, a sharp, brittle sound. "Alex, don't be ridiculous. You can't just declare yourself heir to something. Isn't it?" I turned to look at Grandma Rose, who was standing very still beside the kitchen table. "The estate belongs to you, doesn't it, Grandma? Which means you get to decide who inherits it." She stared at me for a long moment, something flickering in her eyes that I couldn't quite identify. Hope, maybe, or fear. "Alex," she said softly, "you don't understand what you're saying." "I understand perfectly. I understand that this is your house, your land, your decision." And I understand that you deserve to be treated with respect in your own home." My father took a step forward, his hands clenched at his sides. "You have no idea what you're talking about. This estate has been in our family for generations. There are responsibilities, obligations. Like the obligation to treat your mother with dignity?" "Don't lecture me about my obligations to my mother," he snapped. "I've been taking care of her for years while you've been playing architect in Atlanta." Taking care of her or managing her? The kitchen door swung open, and Aunt Judith appeared, followed closely by Maya. They both looked between us, taking in the tension that practically vibrated in the air. "Is everything all right?" Judith asked carefully. "Everything's fine," my mother said quickly. "Just a small family disagreement." "Small?" I laughed. "I just announced that I'm going to inherit this estate instead of Dad. I'd say that's pretty significant." Maya's eyes went wide. "You what?" "Let me ask you something," I said, looking around the room. "How many of you think it's appropriate for Grandma Rose to eat alone in the kitchen while the rest of us use her dining room?" Silence. Judith and Maya exchanged glances, and I could see the discomfort on their faces. "It's not that simple," Judith began. "It is that simple," I interrupted. "Either she's part of this family or she isn't. Either she deserves respect or she doesn't." "That's enough," my father said, his voice low and dangerous. "You're out of line, Alex. Way out of line." "No, Dad. I'm finally in line. For the first time in my life, I'm standing exactly where I should be." Grandma Rose moved closer to me, and when she spoke, her voice carried the authority of 8 decades. "Robert," she said quietly, "we need to talk, all of us, and not in the kitchen." She walked past my parents without another word, Maya taking her hand in support. One by one, the family filed out of the kitchen, leaving just me and my parents in the suddenly quiet space. "You have no idea what you've just done," my mother said, her voice tight with anger. "I've told the truth." "You've destroyed this family," my father said. "No, Dad, I've just exposed what was already broken." The parlor felt different when we all gathered there. The elegant furniture and carefully arranged family photos seemed to mock the tension that filled the room like smoke. Grandma Rose had taken her usual chair by the window, Maya beside her on a small ottoman. Aunt Judith sat on the sofa with Uncle Gerald, while his sons flanked them in matching armchairs. My parents and I were the last to enter, and there was something almost ceremonial about the way we arranged ourselves, them on one side of the room, me on the other, with Grandma Rose at the center like a judge waiting to hear testimony. "Now then," Grandma Rose said, her voice calm but carrying an edge I rarely heard. "I think it's time we had an honest conversation about what's been happening in this house." "Mother," my father began, "there's really no need." "There's every need," she cut him off. "Alex has opened a door that's been closed for far too long." She looked around the room, her gaze touching each face before continuing. "For the past several years, I've watched myself become increasingly invisible in my own home. Small things at first, suggestions that I might be more comfortable somewhere quieter, hints that I was getting too frail to handle certain responsibilities, decisions made on my behalf without consulting me." Uncle Gerald shifted uncomfortably. "Rose, if we haven't been including you—" "It's not about inclusion, Gerald. It's about respect. It's about being treated like a person instead of a problem to be managed." Maya squeezed Grandma Rose's hand. "Tell them about the bank accounts." A chill ran down my spine. "What about the bank accounts?" My father's face went very still. "That's private family business." "Is it?" Grandma Rose looked at him with sad eyes. "Because it seems to me that when my own son starts moving my money around without telling me, it becomes everyone's business." The room went dead silent. I could hear the grandfather clock in the hallway ticking, marking seconds that felt like hours. "You've been moving her money?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "I've been helping her organize her finances," my father said carefully, making sure everything's properly managed. "By transferring funds from her personal accounts into joint accounts?" Maya's voice was sharp with accusation. "Accounts where you're the primary signatory?" I felt something cold settle in my stomach. "Is that true?" Grandma Rose nodded slowly. 3 months ago, Robert convinced me to consolidate some accounts for, quote, efficiency. I signed papers that I thought were simple transfers. It wasn't until last week that I realized what had actually happened. What happened? Aunt Judith asked, though from her tone I suspected she already knew. Most of my liquid assets are now in accounts that require Robert's signature for any withdrawals over $1,000, Grandma Rose said. For my own protection, he said, to prevent me from making any financial mistakes in my old age. The words hit the room like a physical blow. Uncle Gerald sucked in a sharp breath. Judith's hand flew to her mouth. Maya's face flushed with anger. Telling and preparing this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. And my father looked like a man who'd been caught in a lie so fundamental that he couldn't figure out how to explain it away. It's not what it sounds like, my father said finally. It's a common estate planning technique. Elderly people are vulnerable to scams, to poor financial decisions. I'm sitting right here, Robert, Grandma Rose said quietly. You don't need to talk about me like I'm not in the room. And you don't need to talk about her like she's incompetent, I added, my voice shaking with fury. She's sharper than half the people I know. You don't understand the complexities. I understand theft, I said flatly. I understand manipulation. And I understand why you wanted her to eat in the kitchen tonight. What does that mean? My mother demanded. It means he's been positioning her as the confused old lady who can't handle family gatherings, building a case for why she can't handle her own affairs, making it easier to justify taking control of her life, piece by piece. The accusation hung in the air like a challenge. My father's face went through several colors before settling on a dangerous shade of red. How dare you, he said, his voice low and threatening. How dare you suggest that I would what? Steal from your own mother? Manipulate her into giving up control of her own life? Because from where I'm sitting, that's exactly what you've done. I have done nothing but try to protect her. From what? From making her own decisions? From living in her own house on her own terms? From making mistakes, he exploded. From being taken advantage of by people who don't have her best interests at heart. People like you. The question came from Maya, and it landed like a slap. My father turned to stare at her, his mouth opening and closing without sound. You know what I think? Maya continued, her young voice steady despite the magnitude of what she was saying. I think you've been planning this for years. Slowly taking control, making Grandma Rose dependent on you for everything, positioning yourself as the responsible son who has to make the hard decisions. That's ridiculous, my mother said, but her voice lacked conviction. Is it? Aunt Judith spoke for the first time since we'd gathered. Because I've been watching it happen too. The way you've gradually excluded Rose from family decisions. The way you've started referring to what's best for Mother, instead of asking what Mother actually wants. Uncle Gerald cleared his throat uncomfortably. I have to say, Robert, some of the things you've suggested about Rose's capabilities, they don't match what I see when I talk to her. She's 83 years old, my father shouted. She shouldn't have to worry about managing a 200-acre estate and millions of dollars in assets. Shouldn't have to or shouldn't be allowed to? I asked. It's the same thing. No, Dad, it's really not. Grandma Rose had been listening to this exchange with growing sadness, but now she held up a hand for silence. Robert, she said, her voice infinitely gentle, I know you think you're protecting me, and maybe part of you really believes that, but what you're actually doing is erasing me, making me disappear a little more each day. Tears were running down her cheeks now, but her voice remained steady. I may be old, but I'm not ready to disappear yet. And I'm certainly not ready to hand over my entire life to someone who sees me as a problem to be solved. The room fell quiet again, broken only by the sound of Grandma Rose's quiet crying and Toby's soft whimpering from his place at her feet. Finally, Uncle Gerald spoke. What do you want to do, Rose? She wiped her eyes with the handkerchief Maya handed her, then looked around the room at all of us. I want to live in my own house without asking permission, I want to make my own decisions about my own money. I want to eat dinner with my family instead of being shuffled off to eat alone." She paused, then looked directly at me. "And I want to know that when I'm gone, this place will go to someone who understands what it means to treat people with dignity." "You can't be serious," my mother said. "Alex is 29 years old. He has no experience managing an estate this size." "Neither did I when your father died," Grandma Rose replied. "Neither did Robert when he started his business. We learn by doing, Elaine, and more importantly, we learn by caring about the right things." She turned to me, and I saw something in her eyes that I'd never seen before, a kind of fierce determination. "Alex, earlier you said you wanted to inherit this estate. Did you mean it?" Every eye in the room was on me. I could feel the weight of the decision, the magnitude of what was being offered. This wasn't just about money or property. It was about values, about what kind of family we wanted to be. "Yes," I said. I meant it. Even if it means standing up to people who won't like it? Even if it means taking responsibility for something bigger than yourself? I thought about Grandma Rose eating alone in the kitchen. I thought about the sad resignation in her eyes when she'd asked if she was just in the way. I thought about the kind of man I wanted to be, especially then. She smiled through her tears. "Then I think it's time to call my lawyer." The silence that followed was deafening. My father stood frozen in the middle of the parlor, his face cycling through disbelief, rage, and something that looked almost like panic. "Your lawyer?" My father finally managed. "Mother, you can't be serious." "I'm entirely serious," Grandma Rose said, her voice carrying a strength I hadn't heard in years. "I think it's time to make some changes to my will." "You're upset," my mother said quickly. "This has been an emotional evening for everyone. Maybe we should all sleep on it before making any drastic decisions." "I've been sleeping on it for 3 years, Elaine. Ever since you and Robert started treating me like a child who couldn't be trusted with her own life." Maya was still sitting beside Grandma Rose, and I could see the fierce protectiveness in her young face. "Good for you, Grandma Rose." "Maya, stay out of this," my father snapped. "This is between adults." "I am an adult," Maya shot back. "And I'm old enough to recognize manipulation when I see it." Uncle Gerald shifted uncomfortably. "Rose, are you sure about this? Changing a will in the heat of an argument, it's not something you can easily undo." "Gerald," she said, "I appreciate your concern. But this isn't a heat-of-the-moment decision. This is something I've been thinking about for months." That stopped everyone cold. Even I felt a jolt of surprise. "Months?" Aunt Judith asked. Grandma Rose nodded slowly. "Do you remember last Christmas, when Robert suggested I might want to consider moving into assisted living? Just to be safe," he said. "Just so you don't have to worry about maintaining such a big house." I remembered that conversation. It had happened during dessert, presented as a casual suggestion, almost an afterthought. But I also remembered the look on Grandma Rose's face, the way she'd gone very still and quiet. "I started thinking that night about what would happen to this place after I'm gone," she continued. "About who would really appreciate it, who would understand what it means to our family. And I realized that the people who were most eager to get their hands on it were the ones least likely to treat it with respect." "That's not fair," my father said, but his voice lacked conviction. "Isn't it? Robert, when was the last time you visited me just to visit? Not to discuss my finances or my living arrangements or what I should do about the estate, but just to sit and talk?" The question hung in the air, and I watched my father's face as he tried to come up with an answer. The silence stretched long enough to become its own response. "Alex," Grandma Rose said, turning to me, "when you arrived yesterday, what was the first thing you did?" I thought back to Friday evening. "I sat with you and asked about your crossword puzzle. And then? We talked about my work, about the community center. And then? You asked me to walk you upstairs, and I did." She smiled at me with such warmth that it made my chest ache. "You treated me like a person, Alex, like someone whose thoughts and feelings mattered, like someone whose company you actually enjoyed." "I do enjoy your company," I said. "You're one of my favorite people in the world." "And that," she said, looking around the room, is why you're going to inherit this estate." The words hit the room like a thunderclap. My father made a sound that was part protest, part anguish. My mother's face went from pale to bright red. "You're making a mistake," my father said, his voice shaking with emotion. "Alex doesn't understand what's involved in managing an estate like this. He doesn't have the experience, the connections, the business sense." "He has something more important than any of those things," Grandma Rose interrupted. "He has respect for other people. He has kindness. He has the ability to see beyond his own wants and needs." She stood up, moving with the careful dignity that had carried her through 8 decades of life. Toby immediately got to his feet as well, ready to follow wherever she led. "I'm calling Thomas Manning first thing Monday morning," she announced. "It's time to make this official." The mention of Thomas Manning, the family lawyer, seemed to make the decision suddenly terrifyingly real. My father's face went through several expressions before settling on something close to desperation. "Mother," he said, and for the first time his voice was pleading rather than demanding. "Please don't do this. Please think about what you're saying." "I have thought about it, Robert. I've thought about little else for months." "But the family legacy will be preserved by someone who actually cares about family," she finished. "Someone who understands that legacy isn't just about money and property. It's about values. It's about how we treat each other." The moment Grandma Rose left the parlor, the carefully maintained facade of family civility crumbled completely. My father stood in the center of the room, his face a mask of rage and disbelief. "Congratulations," my father said, his voice dripping with bitter sarcasm. "I hope you're proud of yourself." "I am," I replied, surprised to find that it was true. "For the first time in a long time, I'm proud of something I've done." "You've destroyed this family." "No, Dad, I've exposed what was already destroying it." He took a step toward me, and for a moment I thought he might actually attack me. Uncle Gerald must have sensed it too, because he stood up and moved between us. "Robert," he said quietly, "let's all take a breath here." "Take a breath?" My father's voice rose to nearly a shout. "My son just manipulated my mother into disinheriting me, and you want me to take a breath?" "I didn't manipulate anyone," I said. "I told the truth about how you've been treating her." "You want to know what this is really about?" my father said, his voice shaking with emotion. "It's about jealousy. It's about the fact that I've been successful while you've been playing in the sandbox, building your little community centers, and feeling superior about it. This has nothing to do with success. It has everything to do with success. You can't stand the fact that I've built something real, something substantial, while you've been wasting your talent on projects that don't matter. Projects that help people matter." "Help people?" he laughed bitterly. "You want to help people? Take over the construction company. Build real developments that create jobs and generate wealth. Stop pretending that your little charity projects make you some kind of saint." "I don't want to be a saint, Dad. I just want to be decent." Maya spoke up from her position near the window. "Uncle Robert, when was the last time you asked Grandma Rose what she wanted instead of telling her what was best for her?" The question hung in the air like an accusation. My father's face went through several expressions before settling on defensive anger. "You're 22 years old. You don't understand." "I understand enough," she interrupted. "I understand that you've been treating her like a problem to be solved instead of a person to be respected." That was apparently the last straw. My father's control snapped completely. "Fine," he said coldly. "You want the responsibility? You've got it. But don't come crying to me when you realize what you've bitten off. And don't expect any help from me," my father continued, his voice growing colder with each word. "You want to play savior? Do it on your own." "Robert," Aunt Judith said softly, "that's not fair." "Fair?" He turned on her with renewed fury. "What's fair about any of this? What's fair about watching everything I've worked for handed over to someone who thinks good intentions are enough to manage a multi-million-dollar estate?" "Maybe good intentions are exactly what this estate needs," Maya said quietly. My father looked around the room at all of us, his son who'd defied him, his sister who'd sided against him, his niece who'd called him out, his brother-in-law who couldn't quite meet his eyes. The isolation was written clearly on his face. "This family is finished," he said finally. "You've all made your choice, and now you'll have to live with the consequences." He turned to my mother. "Elaine, we're leaving." "Robert, maybe we should." "We're leaving. Now." We heard their voices in the hallway, the sound of suitcases being moved, car doors slamming. Then the BMW's engine started, and they were gone. The parlor felt different without them, smaller somehow, but also lighter, like a storm had passed through and left cleaner air in its wake. "Well," Uncle Gerald said finally, "that was intense." Maya laughed, though there wasn't much humor in it. "That's one word for it." I sank into the chair my father had vacated, suddenly exhausted. The adrenaline that had carried me through the confrontation was wearing off, replaced by the full weight of what had just happened. "Are you okay?" Aunt Judith asked, settling into the chair beside me. "I don't know," I admitted. "I think so. Maybe. Ask me tomorrow." "You did the right thing," Maya said firmly. "It was scary as hell, but it was right." Sunday morning brought rain and a house much quieter than it had been. Uncle Gerald and his sons had already left. Deciding discretion was the better part of valor. I found Maya in the kitchen making coffee, still in her pajamas. "How did you sleep?" she asked. "Like someone who just blew up his entire family," I replied. Aunt Judith appeared, carrying a folder that looked suspiciously legal. "Alex, there are some things you need to know. Things about the family finances that Robert and Elaine probably weren't planning to share with you." My stomach dropped. "What kind of things?" "The kind that explain why they were so desperate to maintain control over Rose's assets." She opened the folder and spread several documents across the table. Bank statements, loan papers, correspondence from lawyers. "Last year, Rose asked me to help her organize some paperwork," Judith explained. She was feeling overwhelmed by all the financial documents Robert kept bringing her to sign. I picked up one of the bank statements. Even with my limited financial knowledge, I could see large sums being moved out of accounts titled with Grandma Rose's name. How much money are we talking about? Over the past 3 years, close to $2 million. Maya whistled low. $2 million? Where did it go? Judith pointed to another document. Real estate investments, construction projects, some legitimate, some, she trailed off. Some what? Some that seemed to exist primarily on paper. I felt something cold settle in my stomach. "Are you saying my father has been stealing from Grandma Rose?" "I'm saying your father has been using Rose's money to fund ventures that she may not have fully understood or agreed to. Whether that constitutes theft depends on what she actually knew and consented to." Maya leaned over my shoulder to look at the documents. "Look at this one," she said, pointing to a loan agreement. "It's for something called Carter Development Holdings. Ever heard of that?" I shook my head. "Dad's company is called Carter Construction. I'd never heard of Carter Development Holdings." "That's because it was formed 6 months ago," Judith said, "with Rose as the primary investor and Robert as the managing partner." Quote, the kitchen door swung open, and Grandma Rose entered, already dressed despite the early hour. She looked smaller than usual, fragile in a way that made my chest ache. "Good morning," she said quietly. "I hope I'm not interrupting anything important." "Actually," Judith said gently, "we were just going over some of your financial documents, the ones you asked me to review." Grandma Rose's face went very still. "Oh, those." "Grandma Rose," I said carefully, "what do you know about Carter Development Holdings?" She was quiet for a long moment, her hands folded in front of her. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper. "I know that Robert told me it was a way to help him expand his business. He said it would be good for the family, good for securing everyone's future. Did you understand what you were investing in?" "I thought I was helping my son achieve his dreams." She looked up at me with eyes full of pain. "I thought I was being a good mother." "You were being a good mother," Maya said fiercely. "You were being taken advantage of." "How much did you invest?" I asked gently. "I don't know," she admitted. "Robert handled all the paperwork. He said the details were too complicated for me to worry about. that I should just trust him to handle everything. Judith and I exchanged glances. The picture that was emerging was worse than I'd imagined. "Grandma Rose," I said, "I need to ask you something, and I need you to be completely honest with me. Did you ever feel pressured to sign things you didn't understand?" She was quiet for so long that I thought she wasn't going to answer. When she finally spoke, her voice was full of shame. Robert would bring me papers and explain that they were routine estate planning documents. He'd say they were just ways to make sure everything was organized properly, that I didn't need to worry about the details. She paused, wiping at her eyes. I trusted him. I thought he was trying to help me. "He was supposed to be helping you," Maya said angrily. "That's what children are supposed to do for their parents." "Instead, he was using that trust against you," I said, feeling anger burn in my chest. Up next, we have 2 more incredible stories that are waiting for you. Just click the image you want to watch, and it will take you there. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to subscribe. It would mean a lot.